Welcome back to the Rugged Angel Cast, a space for women to share their stories, beliefs, and histories that have formed who they are today. I'm your host, Camila. From fan fiction to published author, Sara Raughley joins me to discuss her journey as a writer, her inspirations, and the themes of her upcoming book, The Queen's Spade. She reflects on her early love for storytelling and the importance of representation in literature, particularly for Black women. Our discussion delves into the historical context of her work, the emotional toll of researching complex identities, and the significance of reclaiming narratives. Sara emphasizes the need for more Black stories in literature and the empowerment that comes from seeing oneself represented as a hero. The Queen's Spade will be released on January 14th, 2025, and I urge you all to go out, get a copy, and devour it. It is page-turning literature. I present to you Rugged Angel number 133, Sara Raughley. Hello, Sara Raughley. Welcome to the Rugged Angel Cast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. When I think I saw you on Threads is where I found you, and I was happy to have found you, young Black female author who creates brand new worlds or digs into past worlds and recreates them. So this is going to be interesting. I am excited to learn more about you and your craft.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about it. And I'm also excited to see that there's a growing Black community, especially a Black female community on Threads these days. And it's really cool to see.
It's feeling really hopeful too. It seems like this is the gathering place for us to be right now. And I am every day, there's just a new, all I'm getting is just hundreds of Black women just on Threads. It's I'm looking for people. I'm looking for my tribe. I'm looking for, and it's great. Yes, let us all band together because we need this.
Yep, absolutely. I know I need it.
Yeah, for sure. So let's just get into the fact that your bio states that you began writing stories about freakish little girls with powers because you secretly wanted to be one. What freakish superpowers did you want to develop, or do you still want to develop?
Oh man, so I can't say I used to be because I still am a big RPG fan, like role playing games, especially Final Fantasy and that kind of stuff. And they would have this category of character called the Black Mage. And the Black Mage is somebody who's able to basically use different attack magic, like using the elements, things like that, like fire, almost like Avatar: The Last Airbender kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I would definitely want to be a Black Mage, no pun intended, of someone that's able to use the elements and fire and water and air to create cool magic, attack magic.
Nice.
Yeah. Be an
I like that.
airbender, like a waterbender type.
Yeah, I can imagine it will come in very useful in very many circumstances.
Yeah.
Situations. So when did you discover that you had this love/talent for writing?
Well, I mean, I grew up with my older brothers being really into comic books and anime and science fiction and things like that. And I'm the youngest and the only girl, so I kind of just naturally got into what they were into. So I was
makes sense.
really into the geeky stuff, but specifically the geeky stuff with powerful storytelling. So I was always just captured by those worlds. And I tried to, tell stories through art and drawing at first, but I realized, I would write scripts to go along with the art. And I would realize I was actually better at the writing part than the drawing part. So that's when I leaned into writing.
Excellent. About how old was middle school, junior high?
I would say I've been telling those stories since I was probably 6 or 7.
Oh, wow.
Years, yeah, and just writing
That's
and
amazing.
doing little comics and stuff like that.
Now, would you pass them around and like for your family and friends to read or would you perform them for them, or did you share?
I did. I shared mostly with my brothers, and they're always encouraging. And again, like they drew as well. They drew their own comics. They're much better artists than me, but we would always like share our work with each other. And once I started to write fan fiction, it's when I like started to share with like the outside world. So we would like post it
Ah,
online and stuff like that, and shared stuff with friends. And they were like, "Oh, this is good," and I was like, "Oh, okay." That was a little encouraging too.
that's such an amazing thing to know. Like I'm assuming I'm probably a little bit older than you, but fan fiction, like a lot of you're getting a lot of that. A lot of writers nowadays, and especially women, have gotten their start technically with writing fan fiction, and that's something that I discovered later on, and I dabbled in reading some here and there, but it was like what a great way to train yourself and to just kind of learn like what your style is and how you want to do by taking like sometimes these characters that are already established and bringing them into a new world. So did you find, well, first of all, what fan fiction were you writing?
Uh, I mean, I wrote some Gundam Wing fan fiction, like just a lot of anime type fan fiction. Remember
Okay.
my first fan fiction was like Pokemon fan fiction. I don't even know why. I was trying to figure it out. And like some video game stuff, like Final Fantasy. But I think it really was about, like you said, these are worlds that are already created. So you can just dabble in it and play around in somebody else's sandbox in a way. Um, and you don't necessarily have to do the heavy lifting when it comes to, world building and stuff like that. But
Right.
it made you pay attention to the world building, especially if you're doing, um, fan fiction for sci-fi and fantasy works. You have to know the rules. So you have
Right.
to figure out like, okay, what can I do that would make sense for the rules of the story? Because this fan fiction is for other fans and they'll know, like they'll be able to tell me if I'm getting the rules wrong. Right?
Right. Yeah. And you don't want
Nope.
that. You don't want them telling you that.
Nope.
Your most recent piece of art as of right now, the Queen Spade.
Yes, the Queen Spade. So the Queen Spade is coming out January 14th. And it's actually my first book that I've published that is not science fiction and fantasy. My first,
Really? Okay.
yeah. So my first ever books that I published, the Effigy series, it's a trilogy of books that starts with Fate of Flames, then Siege of Shadows, then Legacy of Light. I published that through Simon and Schuster. It's like a contemporary fantasy. If you're a fan of the Winx Club, if you're a fan of Sailor Moon, that kind of thing, but you want to see some Black girls,
Yeah.
that's that was the Effigy series. And then I wrote the Bones of Ruin trilogy, which is kind of like X-Men, but set in the 19th century, starting an African tightrope dancer. And I I was really, while I was researching the 19th century for the Bones of Ruin trilogy, I came across this weird piece of history that Queen Victoria was the Queen of England during the 19th century. Like we typically call it the Victorian era. She had an African goddaughter. I was like, what? Like an African princess in Britain existed before Meghan Markle. So, you know, and this was an African, like she came from like straight from present day Nigeria. And,
Hmm.
but she was erased from history. And there was something about that that didn't sit well with me. So I wanted to
Right.
unearth that history and I'm retelling her story with some creative liberties as like a revenge thriller.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, if a time and place doesn't, if a story doesn't require a revenge thriller, like this is the story, like this is the one, like absolutely for you to say that like this is based off like loosely inspired by true events, and that's wild for you to have found that out. Just for those who aren't. I'm just going to read real quick, just like the summary. The Queen's Spade is a riveting historical thriller that's loosely inspired by true events. The Count of Monte Cristo meets Bridgerton as revenge, romance, and twisted secrets take center stage in Victorian England's royal court when Sally, a kidnapped African princess and goddaughter to Queen Victoria, plots her way to take down the monarchy that stole her from her homeland. Mwah. Like, who,
Yep.
who doesn't deserves revenge? This Ina, Sally, aka Ina.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is like I haven't finished it yet. I am like very much in the beginning of it, and I am really enjoying it. Like it's absolutely riveting, and I'm not trying to give anything away because I want everybody to get a chance to dig in and get lost in this world. But whoo, I do love revenge.
It's about,
I gotta say,
and I think, especially these days, I think a lot of Black women are starting to understand that we've been gaslit with all of this, oh, don't be an angry Black woman rhetoric. But we actually have a lot
yeah.
of things to be angry about, and we're justified in our anger. And when I think about when I was writing Ina/Sally's story, Sara, I mean, she has so many names, right? And that's part of the problem
Right.
because she originally is named Oba Ina, and she was taken from her home and given as a gift to Queen Victoria. They then
Yeah.
sort of changed her name to Sarah Forbes Spinetta, and Sally was her nickname. So just that sort of revisionism, like the ownership over Black women's bodies, that she was, some people would say, oh, she's allowed to be in the British elite circle, so she should be happy. But it came at massive cost. And she's
exactly
mourning that cost. And she's deciding that, for the people who basically turned her into a propaganda puppet for the British Crown to sort of talk about how altruistic and humanitarian they are and to, parade her around as proof of their, their empire and British Empire can civilize the savage, right? She's like, nah, I'm done with this. So I'm gonna take these people down because they took away my pride, my culture, everything. I'm gonna take them down.
Yeah. And it's all very like no matter it's set in the 1800s in England, Queen's England, but it's still all very relevant to this day of just the simple fact of what you just said about she should be thankful that she's in these quote unquote high society spaces. We should anytime we're in what's considered a predominantly white space, it's like, oh, you should be grateful you're here no matter how we're treating you.
Exactly.
Just be grateful you're in the room.
Exactly.
And that is the innate reason why Black women are quote unquote angry.
Right.
we're dealing with a lot throughout just throughout our lives from Jump Street.
Yep.
How do you go about building your worlds?
It took a lot of research, definitely, especially because this is, a fictional story based off of a true story.
All right.
So even though I'm creating, I'm taking creative liberties, at the same time, I want to get things right. So what was Sally's life like? And so I had to go to archives in terms of like, first edition type, newspapers and letters and journals that were written by Sally herself and people from Sally. And some just really disturbing stuff that I learned in terms of like the way that they talked about Sally when she was a child, straight from their mouths, about her
Oh my
being
goodness.
like, oh, she's a good type of Negro, and et cetera, and just
Mm,
language that was being used. But also just doing a lot of work in terms of researching London and British society in the 19th century. Luckily, I'd already kind of done a lot of this research for my last trilogy, The Bones of Ruin, because it's also set in 19th century Britain. But
mm-hmm,
I had to take one step further and really sort of researching the crown, researching Sally's Sally's life in particular, and
mm-hmm,
took me to some really interesting places. Like Sally, we're told, if you search up a Wikipedia page, it says that she was married off to some guy like 14 years older than her, a Nigerian businessman, and she was like 18 or 19. But if you read her letters, she didn't want to be married. She was against
wow,
it. She felt like she was being sold off and her freedom was being taken from her. So it
wow.
definitely took a
Yeah.
lot of research.
How did it affect your and emotional state at all as you're learning all of these things, as you're finding all of these things, just reading these letters, these first accounts of this woman's life?
You know, it it made me think about myself a lot. I saw myself a lot in Ina. I saw myself a lot in this character, and I started to really understand why I was drawn to writing about this character in the way that I was writing. Because a lot of what she was going through, I realized that I was also going through. And
Mm,
it gave me, rather than feeling sad or upset, I felt like it gave me an outlet for my own anger. It gave me the okay to be upset or to be angry about certain things that were happening in my own life because of the gendered and racial systems that were in, you know?
mm, mm-hmm. I mean, as if you needed a quote unquote excuse
Yeah.
or a reason, but yeah, that makes absolute sense. Just I couldn't imagine just like being able to read these letters from her and just being put directly into what her life was like at the time and what her mindset was,
Oh,
and you just like in no way could it have been anything good, and just what she had to go through. Um,
I mean, it's complex because I mean, she also, as the whole situation is just so, it shows the complexity of what happens sort of when you take somebody from their homeland and you raise them in another land and you raise them in
mm,
another family, because she did have love for Queen Victoria. If
mm,
you read those letters, and the fact that she named her firstborn child after Victoria, although I'm not 100%
mm,
sure whether or not that's because she loved Victoria or whether she felt indebted to her or whether she felt like she had to, like she had to. So a lot of this was like, it wasn't clear cut. Like, she wasn't like, I hate my life and that's it. It wasn't clear cut. It was a mixture of emotions, a mixture of, affective attachments, and just shows how
right.
messy these things can get. Um, but ultimately, I think me as a third party observer, I'm also looking at Ina as part of a larger system of oppression. So that's kind of
Hmm.
what I wanted to lean into.
Yeah, 'cause it's very complex because, as you say, she's been taken from her home, taken from her family, brought into a new place, a new country, brought to a new family, and then on the one hand, yes, innately you are going to be pissed about this situation, but on the flip side, it's like she's looking at all of these, you know, privileges or these other all of these things that she's getting that she wouldn't have gotten otherwise, or et cetera. And it's just like it's a very complex thing, and And I would imagine it's akin to being in an abusive relationship in any sense of the word. And so wow, yeah, this is really deep, and it's amazing, and it's a testament to you as a writer, is that you're able to entertain as well as educate, but also, and there's all of these different levels to these characters, to this story. And that's what I really appreciate about what I'm getting into in in the Queen's Spade.
Thank you.
And quite frankly, I look forward to reading your other series as well, like a tightrope walker that can't die. Come on now, that's
Answer can't die. And really, that character Iris from the Bones of Ruin was inspired by Sarah Bartman, who was taken from her land as well and basically put on display in the 1830s in London's Piccadilly and in France as in a human zoo, right? Like they had human zoos back then. So a lot of this is like me trying to unearth these buried histories that we don't talk about enough. Because I think that if you go back to the archives in terms of like to history and see how Black women have been treated throughout history, the things that they don't teach you in school, then it also provides a framework and a context for what's happening now. Because we may not be in human zoos, like human zoos may not exist anymore, but the fact that they did exist and we were...
Isn't social media basically just a human zoo?
That's true. Like, what do they call? I guess they're calling it X now, right? Twitter.
Yeah.
You really see how these oppressive systems have evolved over time. These oppressive systems meant to trap us and to keep us silent and to keep us obedient. So looking into history really made me like it. It is upsetting, but it's empowering to know the history, I think. If you're a student of history, then you're doomed to repeat it.
Exactly. There is a line, and I believe it's the first line? In your book, in The Queen's Spade, a young lady can only take so many injuries before humiliation and insult forge a vow of revenge. That hits very differently on this day, November 11th, 2024, in the United States of America, as a Black woman.
Well, it's a kind of a flip on an Edgar Allan Poe line in one of his short stories. And I did that for several reasons, because the particular Edgar Allan Poe story that I was sort of looking at, The Cask of Amontillado, was about revenge. And so I wanted to make those connections. But Edgar Allan Poe himself supported slavery. So I wanted to reclaim that and repurpose it to fit and suit the voice of a Black woman. So in the Queen's Spade, what you'll see are a lot of allusions to different like white works, right? Like Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte, that kind of thing, and sort of taking it and sort of flipping it on its head to repurpose it, almost like to challenge it and to say like, this is an issue. Like these white stories are also part of the problem. So let's flip it and repurpose it for the story of a Black woman.
Wow. So multi-layered. I am so glad I'm speaking to you, because I would have caught that. I never read any Jane Austen or Jane Eyre or any of those. That was not my thing.
It's like I had to in school So it's like,
Hmm.
how, like, when I think again, like, what are we taught in schools? You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
we're taught all of these white books and not to
Exactly.
critique them. And I wanted to critique them a little bit.
Yes. As is your right.
That's what we do as authors.
Yes. So you primarily write young adult fiction.
Uh-huh.
Yes. So what motivates you to stay kind of in that lane?
Well, the Queen Spade is a young adult slash adult crossover. So I think
Mm,
it's kind of like younger people can get into it, 13 and up, but also like adults can also get into it. And I've always just been drawn to writing for youth because I feel like the youth are really open minded when it comes to different types of stories. These days,
mm,
honestly, it's a bit tough. And I think a lot of it is not necessarily because of the readership, but because of the
mm,
industry. The publishing
mm.
industry tends to have its own way of doing things that locks out a lot of Black women and makes it difficult for us to tell the kind of stories that we want to tell.
Really?
Um, yeah, but when I go to schools and I see young people really like engaging in my work, I'm like, okay, like this is why I do it. Because young people are open minded. Because when I was a kid, I didn't have these kinds of stories. And I really wanted them. So I want to write stories for like a little Sara, you know, um, that wants to see herself represented. I think that's really important.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes all of the difference in the world just being exposed to to our Black
Mhm.
stories. About how around what age do you think that you were when you started to discover more Black authors?
Um, I mean, probably around when I was in high school, I think. And it was just like I grew up in more of a white area. And again, schooling, libraries pushed a lot of white books. And
Right.
TV shows that you watch are like the movies. It's largely white, except for when it comes to like a specific type of story. Then they're like, oh,
Yeah.
cast some Black people. But only when
Which is usually a trauma,
right,
a very traumatic story.
exactly, a traumatic story. And, I was just, what it was around when I was in high school and I started to look for my own stories apart from that. I think the internet really helped, in terms of like a community of people who also read and finding a community of people who are looking for stories that reflect them and getting like good recommendations and things like that. But yeah, growing up, it took a while. I mean, it's crazy how these things can brainwash you when you only see white girls, white girls, white girls, white girls doing this and doing that. Like I can write, I've been, like I told you, I wrote, I started writing when I was very, very young, like 6 or 7, but I couldn't write an actual Black protagonist until I was 14 years old. Because when I was 6 or
Hmm.
8, I was taught by society that we couldn't be heroes. So I was writing about little white girls
Right.
because I thought that that made sense because the world told
Yeah.
me that made sense. And I had to unlearn and unpack and fight against that. So again, that's part of the reason why I'm like, we need more Black books for youth, for young people, so that a 6 or 7
Yes.
year old can see themselves as the heroine.
Exactly. And it's not even, and Sally is not even just the hero. Like she is her own hero at this point. Like she has, and that's another important lesson that I think we need to learn early as Black women or young Black girls need to learn is to, you don't have to wait for somebody else, you can save yourself.
Absolutely. Be the protagonist. Be the villain. Be the villain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we're in.
Sometimes it is a gray area.
I think Black women are entering our villain era now, to be honest.
It is, yeah. This is it. This is the beginning of our story, of the villain story.
Yeah, this is our villain origin story for real.
So, as you know, and off of that, how much of your time is spent thinking about how to assassinate a person?
Honestly, I've been if I were Ida, I don't know, like I think the Queen Spade is basically Ina thinking about like how to destroy people. And she doesn't necessarily like want to kill people because that would be too easy. Some people she's okay with, like,
Mhm.
but other people it's like when you look at the way in which people, especially of a certain society, sort of hold like what they hold dear. It's like rather
Mm.
than just killing you, I want to destroy you. I want to take away what
Yes.
you love most. I want to like usher in your public downfall. And
Mm.
you know what I mean? And just like dismantle you.
That, yeah, that's
So
so much more satisfying.
yeah, right. It's like that is more satisfying. But every once in a while, you know, you fantasize. These days, these days, I've had a lot of like rage. To be honest, since the
Yeah.
election, I've been like just enraged by various things. I've been bouncing from just disconnecting to protect my peace
Mm.
and being incredibly sorrowful and then being incredibly rageful. And then maybe
Yeah.
some of those like fantasies. But
Yeah, this week has been a roller coaster.
yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. So that's why I think this book, The Queen Spade, if there's anybody that wants to see, you know, Black rage, Black feminine rage being, um, you know, validated, then this book is for you.
Absolutely. Yes, I couldn't agree more. And it's absolutely perfect for that. So we're gonna get to this point now in my show where I ask all of my guests a random question. This is just known as the big question. So your random question is, what gives you butterflies in your stomach?
What gives me butterflies? Cupcakes. I
Ooh,
shouldn't because, like, I don't want to overindulge. And I'm trying to lose weight, but cupcakes, I don't know, when I see them like freshly baked, get a little butterfly in my stomach. Ah,
do you have a favorite flavor, a favorite kind, favorite
I love red velvet.
bakery?
Red velvet. And there's a
Uh,
really good bakery close-ish to my old university that I used to study at. But I don't live around there anymore, so I can't go there. But I remember like going there after school all the time.
nice. I do love a good cupcake.
Yeah. We need
Well, Sarah,
like treats. These
yes, yes, all of the sweet treats. I think like 2 nights after the election, I baked like a peach cobbler. Like, this is dumb. I need and I'm not that person. Like, I don't normally just go around baking shit. It's just for shits and giggles.
stress relievers.
Yeah. So, thank you so much, Sarah, for talking with me about your amazing book, The Queen Spade, which will be coming out January 14th, 2025. And it'll be available for pre-order.
Yeah, it's already available for pre-order, so anybody can pre-order it. Pretty much from now, leading up to January 14th.
Yes, friends, go out and do that. Please support Black women, authors, creators, and of all sorts. And where can people find you online, Sarah?
People can find me at www.sararaughly.com. That's SARAHRAUGHLEY.com. And I'm no longer on Twitter. I said peace out to, to Twitter. So
Good for
their
you.
social medias under, you can find me at S_Raughley.
Hey you, thanks for listening to the Rugged Angel Cast. This podcast was produced, hosted, and edited by Camila Adams, also known as Rugged Angel Productions. Please subscribe, rate, and share the show. It really helps with visibility. Take care.